Okay, we are going to do chapter 2. I suppose there's a time in practically every young boy's life when he's affected by that wonderful disease of puppy love. I don't mean the kind a boy has for the pretty little girl that lives down the road. I mean the real kind. The kind that has 4 small feet and a wiggly tail and sharp little teeth that can gnaw on a boy's finger. The kind a boy can romp and play with, even eat and sleep with. Okay, so he's saying that every single boy, he believes that in every single boy's life, they are affected by the disease of puppy love. They just are really just want a puppy, love puppies, are just crazy about puppies. Okay. I was 10 years old when I first became infected with this terrible disease. I'm sure no boy in the world had it worse than I did. It's not easy for a young boy to want a dog and not be able to have one. It starts gnawing on his heart and gets all mixed up in his dreams. It gets worse and worse until finally it becomes almost unbearable. Okay, so he says he wanted a dog so bad, and he couldn't have one, and his heart started to feel like it was being gnawed on. He kept dreaming about it, and it just becomes unbearable at a certain point. If my dog wanting had been that of an ordinary boy, I'm sure my mother and father would have gotten me a puppy. But my wants were different. I didn't want just one dog, I wanted 2. And not just any kind of dog. They had to be a special kind and a special breed. I wonder why he wanted them to be a specific type of dog, and he wanted 2 of them. I wonder why. I had to have some dogs. I went to my father and had a talk with him. He scratched his head and thought it over. Well, Billy, he said, I heard that old man Hatfield's collie is going to have pups. I'm sure I can get one of them for you. He may as well have poured cold water on me. What? Why? Papa, I said, I don't want an old collie dog. I want hounds, coon hounds, and I want 2 of them. Oh, okay, so he wanted coon hounds. They probably hunt coons, and maybe he wanted 2 of them so they can hunt together. So he didn't want just any kind of dog. I could tell by the look on his face that he wanted to help me, but couldn't. He said, Billy, those kinds of dogs cost money, and that's something we don't have right now. Maybe someday, when we can afford it, you can have them, but not right now. Okay, so they don't have the money for those kind of dogs. And those kind of dogs are not the dogs that you can just get from a neighbor. They're dogs that cost a lot of money, I guess. I didn't give up. After my talk with Papa, I went to Mama. I fared no better there. Fared no better means Mama said the same thing Papa did, so he didn't get any luckier there. Right off, she said I was too young to be hunting with hounds. Besides, a hunter needed a gun, and that was one thing I couldn't have. Not until I was 21, anyway. So Mama said, no, you're too young to hunt with hounds. You can't even carry a gun. You're too young. I couldn't understand it. There I was, sitting right in the middle of the finest hunting country in the world, and I didn't even have a dog. So he just thought, I'm right here where everybody's hunting, but I don't even have a dog to hunt with. Our home was in a beautiful valley far back in the rugged Ozarks. The country was new and sparsely settled. The land we lived on was Cherokee land, allotted to my mother because of the Cherokee blood that flowed in her veins. It lay in a strip from the foothills of the mountains to the banks of the Illinois River in northeastern Oklahoma. Okay, so there was mountains, there was a river, there was just everything, and he didn't have the dogs to go hunt in all that beautiful land. The land was rich, black, and fertile. Papa said it would grow hair on a cross-cut saw. He was the first man to stick the cold steel point of a turning plow into the virgin soil. Mama had picked so he just said it was really rich soil that anything could grow on. And Baba was the first one that started growing things in the soil. Mama had picked the spot for our log house. It nestled at the edge of the foothills in the mouth of a small canyon and was surrounded by a grove of huge red oaks. Behind our house, we could see miles and miles of the mighty Ozarks. In the spring, the aromatic scent of wildflowers, redbuds, pawpaws, and dogwoods drifting into the wind currents spread over the valley and around our home. So he's just saying where his house is. Okay, Mama picked it, and it was in the mouth of a small canyon. Canyon is just a place where there's lots of big, huge rock all on both sides, and it was surrounded by some huge red oaks, and you could smell flowers because of all of in the spring you could smell all of the flowers they would just go all around his home. So that just sounds absolutely lovely. Below our fields, twisting and winding, ran the clear blue waters of the Illinois River. So he even had a river by his house. The banks were cool and shady. The rich bottom land near the river was studded with tall sycamores, birches, and box elders. So those are all kinds of trees. To a 10-year-old country boy, it was the most beautiful place in the whole wide world, and I took advantage of it all. I roamed the hills and the river bottoms. I knew every game trail in the thick cane brakes and every animal track that was pressed in the mud along the river banks. So he knew everything about. He knew that if he saw an animal paw print into the mud, he knew what animal it came from. The ones that fascinated me the most were the baby-like tracks of a river coon. I'd lie for hours examining them. Before leaving, I'd take a switch and sweep them all away. These I called my trail looks. The next day I'd hurry back, and sure enough, 9 times out of 10, there in the clean, swept ground, I would again find the tracks of a ringtail coon. So he loved looking at the trails from the river coons. And he would just stay there looking at them, and then he would take a little just branch and he would sweep them away, and then he'd hurry the next day and they were there again. So he knew that that's where they just hung out. That's where they would spend their nights over there. So he knew that that's where he could track them if he had his dogs. I knew he had passed over the trail during the night. I could close my eyes and almost see him humped up and waddling along, fishing under the banks with his delicate little paws for crawfish, frogs, and minnows. So he could already imagine that river coon just hunting over there by the river banks. I was a hunter from the time I could walk. I caught lizards on the rail fences, rats in the corn crib, and frogs in the little creek that ran through the fields. I was a young Daniel Boone. Okay, so he loved hunting ever since he was really little. As the days passed, the dog-wanting disease grew worse. I began to see dogs in my sleep. I went back to my father and mother. It was the same old story. Good hounds cost money, and they just didn't have it. Okay, so he just couldn't stop thinking about dogs. He started dreaming about dogs, and he went to his mom and dad and said, "Mom, Dad, please give me some dogs." And they said, "We don't have money. They cost a lot of money. We don't have that." My dog wanting became so bad I began to lose weight, and my food didn't taste good anymore. Mama noticed this, and she had a talk with Papa. So he's even losing weight and not even eating because he just can't stand not having the dogs. "You're going to have to do something," she said. "I never saw a boy grieve like that. It's not right at all." "I know," said Papa, "and I feel just as badly as you do, but what can I do? You know we don't have that kind of money." So they're very worried about him, his parents. But they just don't have the money to help him get the dogs. "I don't care," said Mama. "You've got to do something. I can't stand to see him cry like that. Besides, he's getting to be a problem. I can't get my work done. He follows me around all day long begging for hounds." So Mama said, I don't like to see him cry, But he also just won't even let me work because all he does is follow me around begging for hounds. I offered to get him a dog, said Papa, but he doesn't want just any kind of dog. He wants hounds, and they cost money. Do you know what the Parker boys paid for those 2 hounds they bought? $75. If I had that much money, I'd buy another mule. I sure do need one. So Papa said they're just extremely expensive. $75 back in the day was a lot of money. And they're living in the countryside. They don't have that kind of money. Usually back in the day when people would live in the countryside, they would grow their own crops and they would live off the land. So they didn't have money to just, go and spend like that. I had overheard this conversation from another room. At first it made me feel pretty good. At least I was getting to be a problem. Then I didn't feel so good. I knew my mother and father were poor and didn't have any money. I began to feel sorry for them and myself. So at the beginning he felt good because he thought, oh, if I'm going to be a problem, then maybe they'll try to fix the problem by getting me those hounds. But then he felt bad because he's like, oh, I don't want to be a problem. I know my parents don't have the money. If they did, they would just give it to me. And, he's kind of, him being a problem is just making it hard for him and hard for his parents because they want to give him the hounds, but they can't. After thinking it over, I figured out a way to help. Even though it was a great sacrifice, I told Papa I had decided I didn't want 2 hounds. 1 would be enough. I saw the hurt in his eyes. It made me feel like someone was squeezing water out of my heart. So he told his papa, you know what, I'll just take 1 hound. I don't need the 2, just 1. And his dad got really sad because he didn't want to give him 1 hound. He wanted to give him 2, but he couldn't even give him 1. He didn't have the money. So his dad got really sad that he couldn't even give him 1 hound. Papa set me on his lap and we had a good talk. He told me how hard times were and that it looked like a man couldn't get a fair price for anything he raised. Some of the farmers had quit farming and were cutting railroad ties so they could feed their families. If things didn't get better, that's what he'd have to do. He said he'd give anything if he could get me some good hounds for me, but there didn't seem to be any way he could right then. So times were tough right now, and everything that Papa was growing to sell, it was just not, people were just not paying enough because there were hard times right now and nobody had money to pay enough for whatever it was that Papa was growing. So he had to sell it for cheaper, and then he was getting less money, so he had less money than ever before, and he really couldn't get him not even 1 hound. I went off to bed with my heart all torn up in little pieces and cried myself to sleep. Oh man, he really wants those dogs. The next day Papa had to go to the store. Late that evening I saw him coming back. As fast as I could I ran to meet him, expecting a sack of candy. Instead he handed me 3 small steel traps. Oh, so Papa kind of came up with a little plan. He'll give him some steel traps. Maybe that will keep him busy. If Santa Claus himself had come down out of the mountains, reindeer and all, I would not have been more pleased. I jumped up and down and cried a whole bucket full of tears. I hugged him and told him what a wonderful papa he was. So he was very excited for the traps because remember, he said since he could walk, he was a hunter. He loved trapping all kinds of animals that he could find. He showed me how to set them by mashing the spring down with my foot and how to work the trigger. I took them to bed with me that night. Oh man, he was so excited with his traps that he let them sleep in bed with him. The next morning I started trapping around the barn. The first thing I caught was Sammy, our house cat. If this didn't cause a commotion. I didn't intend to catch him. I was trying to catch a rat, but somehow he came nosing around and got in my trap. Oh no, poor Sammy, the house cat. He got stuck in the trap. My sister started bawling and yelling for Mama. She came running, wanting to know what in the world was going on. None of us had to tell her. Sammy told her with his spitting and squalling. Oh, poor Sammy. He was mad. He couldn't understand what that thing was that was biting his foot, and he was making an awful fuss about it. His tail was as big as a wet corn cob, and every hair in his small body was sticking straight up. He spit and yowled and dared anyone to get close to him. Oh, the cat was really upset, and he was so mad that he was kind of like dangerous. He was trying to attack anybody that was getting close to him, even though they were just trying to help him. My sisters yelled their fool heads off all the time, saying, "Poor Sammy! Poor Sammy!" Mama shushed them up and told me to go get the forked stick from under the clothesline. I ran and got it. Mama was the best helper a boy ever had. She put the forked end over Sammy's neck and pinned him to the ground. It was bad enough for the trap to be biting his foot, but to have his neck pinned down like that was way too much. That way was too much. He threw a fit. I never heard such a racket in all my life. So why were they pinning? Mama was pinning his neck down so that they could unpin his foot that was stuck in the trap. But since Sammy was trying to bite them and trying to attack everybody that was trying to help him, then they had no choice but to pin down his neck. It wasn't long until everything in the place was all spooked up. The chickens started cackling and flew way up on the hillside. Daisy, our milk cow, all but tore the barn lot up and refused to give any milk that night. Sloppy Ann, our hog, started running in circles, squealing and grunting. Sammy wiggled and twisted. So before we go to that paragraph, so everybody was spooked up because of how loud Sammy was yelling. The chickens were flying up and cackling. The milk cow was just kicking everything up in the barn, so made a huge mess in the barn and didn't give any milk that night. The pig, the hog, Sloppy Ann, hog is another word for pig, so she started running around in circles, squealing and grunting, so everybody was all shaken up. All the animals, all the humans, everybody. Sammy wiggled and twisted. He yowled and spit, but it didn't do him any good. Mama was good and stout. She held him down tight to the ground. I ran in and put my foot on the trap spring, mashed it down, and released his foot. With one loud squall, he scooted under the barn. Poor Sammy. So he ran under the barn after that, after he got released. After it was all over, Mama said, "I don't think you'll have any more trouble with that cat. I think he has learned his lesson." Because remember, he wasn't trying to trap Sammy. Sammy was just being nosy, and then he got, just because he was nosy, he put his foot in the trap by mistake, and he got trapped. How wrong Mama was. Oh, so Mama said, "He's learned his lesson. You won't have any more problems with him." How wrong Mama was. Sammy was one of those nosy kind of cats. He would lie up on the red oak limbs and watch every move I made. I found some slick little trails out in our garden, down under some tall hollyhocks. Thinking they were game trails and not knowing they were Sammy's favorite hunting trails, I set my traps. Oh no, so he found some trails in the garden, and they were Sammy's favorite hunting trails, but he didn't know that. Billy did not know that, so he put his traps there. Sammy couldn't understand what I was doing out there messing around his hunting territory. He went to investigate. Oh no, I hope he doesn't get trapped again. It wasn't long until I had him limping with all 4 feet. Oh no, he got trapped so much that all 4 of his feet were hurting. Every time Papa saw Sammy lying around in the warm sun with his feet wrapped up in turpentine rags, he would laugh until big tears rolled down his cheeks. Papa would laugh not because he was laughing at Sammy's pain, but it was because he just couldn't believe it. Like, "Sammy, stay away from the traps. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? How many times?" Mama had another talk with Papa. She said he was going to have to say something to me, because if I caught that cat one more time, it would drive her out of her mind. So every time that he got trapped in the traps, the same thing had to happen. They had to pin his neck down. He would yell. All the animals would get riled up, and the girls would get really upset. So she said, "Papa, you need to tell Billy to do something about those traps, because you cannot keep trapping Sammy, because I'm losing my mind with everything that happens after that." Papa told me to be a little more careful where I set my traps. "Papa," I said, "I don't want to catch Sammy, but he's the craziest cat I ever saw. He sees everything I do and just has to go sniffing around. So Sammy's just watching him and then going and checking what he's doing every single time. Papa looked over at Sammy. He was lying all sprawled out in the sunshine with all four paws bandaged and sticking straight up. His long tail was swishing this way and that. "You see, Papa," I said, "he's watching me right now, just waiting for me to set my traps." Papa walked off to the barn. I heard him laughing fit to kill. So Papa he just cannot believe that Sammy would keep doing this. And he was just laughing. It finally got too tough for Sammy. He left home. Oh, he came in once in a while, all long and lean looking, but he never was the same friendly cat anymore. He was nervous and wouldn't let anyone pet him. He would gobble down his milk and then scoot for the timber. Oh, poor Sammy. So he kept getting caught so many times that he was just scared now, and he would just stay over there in the forest somewhere and only come when he was really hungry to come and eat, and he would leave again. Once I decided to make friends with him because I felt bad about catching him in my traps. I reached out my hand to rub his back. He swelled up like a sitting hen. His eyeballs got all green and he growled way down deep. He spat at me and drew back his paw like he was going to knock my head off. I decided I'd better leave him alone, so he wasn't friendly anymore. He was really scared after that and really spooked, so he didn't trust anyone anymore, poor Sammy. In no time at all, I cleaned out the rats. So he caught all the rats. Then something bad happened. I caught one of Mama's prize hens. I got one of those young man peach tree switchings over that. So he caught one of Mama's favorite beautiful hens in his trap, and Mama spanked him over that. A switching was what they used to call a spanking. Mama told me to go down to the cane brakes back of our fields and trap. This opened up all kinds of new wonders. I caught opossums, skunks, rabbits, and squirrels. So he had to go down further down to trap things down far away from the house so that he wouldn't catch the hens anymore. And he found all of these different kinds of animals that he could trap. Papa showed me how to skin my game. Skin game means anytime that there's hunters, when they catch an animal, they call it game. And skinning them just means taking off their skin. In neat little rows, I tacked the hides on the smokehouse wall. I'd stand for hours and admire my magnificent trophies. And the reason they would skin the animals is because they needed the fur, because with the fur they could use that to make all kinds of coats and hats and things to keep warm in the winter. There was only one thing wrong. I didn't have a big coon skin to add to my collection. I couldn't trap old Mr. Ringtail. He was too smart for me. He'd steal the bait from the traps, spring the triggers, and sometimes even turn them over. Oh man, so that's the river coon that he's talking about, that he would always see his paws after every morning after he already washed them, kind of messed them up with a branch, and then he would come in the morning, remember, and he would say, "Oh, I'd see his paws again. I knew he was over there hunting." So he was trying to catch that big coon, but he was too smart. He would go and he would steal any of the bait from in the traps. You put little food for bait, and he would just steal them out, and then, or he would just spring the triggers, and sometimes he would just completely knock down his traps. So he was way too smart. Once I found a small stick standing upright in one of my traps. I showed it to Papa. So he found a stick that was just like straight up in the trap, and he probably thought the coon put it in there so that he wouldn't get hurt, and he could still set off the trap, but then take the bait. He laughed and said that the stick must have fallen from a tree. It made no difference what Papa said. I was firmly convinced that that smart old coon had deliberately poked that stick in my trap. The traps helped my dog wanting considerably, but like a new toy, the newness wore off, and I was right back where I started from. Only this time it was worse, much worse. I had been exposed to the feel of wildlife. Oh man, so he said while he was busy with his traps, he was busy. So, it helped him not think about the dogs as much that he wanted. But after a while, it started coming back, and then he just thought, wow, imagine what I could do if I had dogs. I can already trap these many animals with my little traps. Imagine if I actually had dogs. I started pestering Mama again. She said, oh no, not that again. I thought you'd be satisfied with the traps. No, Billy, I don't want to hear any more about hounds. So Mama was just like, I don't want to hear that anymore. We already told you we don't have the money. Do not start that again. I knew Mama meant what she said. This broke my heart. I decided I'd leave home. I sneaked out a quart of jar of peaches, some cold cornbread, and a few onions, and started up the hollow back of our house. I had it all figured out. I'd go away off to some big town, get 100 dogs, and bring them all back with me. So he got so sad that he said, I'm going to run away from home. And he took some food, and he said, I'm going to go to a town. I'm going to get 100 dogs and bring them all back home. I made it all right until I heard a timber wolf howl. This stopped my home leaving. So he heard a wolf howl, and he thought, oh no, I'm scared of wolves. I'm just going to go back home. I'm not going to run away after all. When the hunting season opened that fall, something happened that was almost more than I could stand. I was lying in bed one night trying to figure out a way I could get some dogs when I heard the deep baying of a coonhound. I got up and opened my window. It came again. The deep voice rang loud and clear in the frosty night. Now and then I could hear the hunter whooping to him. Okay, so he hears a hunter and he hears a hound, a coonhound, and those are the dogs he wants. And they're off over there in the forest hunting, and he can hear them. And this is torture for Billy because he wants to do the same thing, but he doesn't have a hound. And it's hunting season, so it's going to be a long season of hearing this hound and the hunter. Poor Billy. The hound hunted all night. Oh man. He quit when the rooster started crowing at daybreak. The hunter and the hound weren't the only ones awake that night. I stayed up and listened to them until the last tones of the hound's voice died away in the daylight hours. So Billy wasn't even sleeping. He was staying up all night hearing them hunt. That morning I was determined to have some hounds. I went again to Mama. This time I tried bribery. Bribery is when you're trying to say, if you give me this, I'll do this. If you give me a hound, I'll wash the cars. I'll do this. I'll do some laundry. I told her if she'd get me a hunting dog, I'd save the money I earned from my furs, and I'd buy her a new dress and a box full of pretty hats. Oh, so he was trying to bribe her with that. That time I saw tears in her eyes. It made me feel all empty inside, and I cried a little too. By the time she was through kissing me and talking to me, I was sure I didn't need any dogs at all. I couldn't stand to see Mama cry. So Mama got really sad because she can't get him any hounds. It's not that she doesn't want to. She just doesn't have the money. So it's really sad because any and you guys know that if your parents see that you really, really want something, you're a good kid and you deserve it, you've been working so hard, we want to give it to you. So it would break our heart if we can't get it for you. So that's why Mama was crying. And Billy was so sad seeing his mom cry. He loves his mom so much. He didn't want to see her cry. So he was like, I don't think I need dogs anymore, just because he saw Mama cry and it broke his heart. The next night I heard the hound again. I tried to cover my head with a pillow to shut out the sound. It was no use. His voice seemed to bore its way through the pillow and ring in my ears. I had to get up and again go to the window. I'm sure if that coon hunter had known that he was slowly killing a 10-year-old boy, he would have put a muzzle on his hound. Oh man, that's a little dramatic. But he said he was trying to cover his head with a pillow so he wouldn't hear them hunting anymore. He kept hearing that hunter and the hound again. He tried to cover his head with the pillow, but it didn't matter. He just kept hearing them. And he said that hunter was killing a 10-year-old boy because he wanted to hunt so bad too, and just hearing them, he felt like he was dying inside. And he said if that hunter knew what was happening, he would have probably put a muzzle on his hound. And muzzles are the ones that stop dogs from barking, so they go around their mouth. A little dramatic if you ask me, but Billy really wanted those dogs. Sleep was out of the question. Even on nights when I couldn't hear the hounds, I couldn't sleep. I was afraid if I did, he would come and I would miss hearing him. So even if he didn't hear the hound because they were too far away hunting somewhere else, even then, Billy still didn't sleep because he wanted to hear them so bad that he's like, I can't fall asleep because if I did, then I'm not going to hear him if he does come. By the time hunting season was over, I was a nervous wreck. My eyes were red and bloodshot because he hadn't been sleeping, so his eyes were so red. I lost weight and I was as thin as a bean pole. He probably wasn't eating either. Mama checked me over. She looked at my tongue and turned back one of my eyelids. If I didn't know any better, she said, I swear you weren't sleeping well, are you? So Mama's like, have you been sleeping well? Why, Mama, I said, I go to bed, don't I? What does a boy go to bed for if it isn't to sleep? So Billy didn't want to tell his mom. He probably didn't want to worry her anymore, so he didn't want to tell her that he hadn't been sleeping. By the little wrinkles that bunched up on her forehead, I could tell that Mama wasn't satisfied, so she didn't believe him, or she was just like, well, something's going on, because he just doesn't look good. Papa came in during one of these inspections. Mama told him she was worried about my health. He said, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just because he's been cooped up all winter. A boy needs sunshine and exercise. He's almost 11 now. I'm going to let him help me in the fields this summer. That will put the muscles back on him. So Papa said he's just been inside the house all winter. He needs to get out, exercise, get some sunshine. And this summer he's going to be helping in the fields and he's going to get some more muscles on him. I thought this was wonderful. I'd finally grown up to be a man. I was going to help Papa with the farm. So Billy was excited to help Papa. He felt like a man because he's going to go do some manly work. Okay, that's the end of that chapter.